And you lock up your clothing, all of it, wrap a towel around your waist, and go into the hottest room I've ever been in my life. And the instructions are you lie down on a slab upon which one could cook eggs. And you turn yourself over like a good egg until the sweat pours off of you. And then you get up and go into the sauna, which is hotter yet. And every breath feels like you're inhaling a flame, and the sweat just pours off of you. And then you come out into the first room, which now feels really quite comfy. And you get back on the slab, and a man who knows very few words in English begins to pummel you hard and pour soapy water all over you and rubs his hands in places you've never been. And then pours water over you that could make tea. It's that hot. And when you leave, you feel great. I think in part because it's like that hitting yourself over the head with a hammer thing. It feels so good when it stops. Now I'm telling you all this because hardly a word took place. And what words there were accompanied by gestures, because he speaks Turkish and maybe that many words of English, and I speak English and maybe that many words of Turkish. And yet somehow it was very odd to put my hand on this stranger's shoulder and have him knead my shoulders, and then to have him throw suds in my face and pour hot water all over me, and to rub his loofah sponge all over my back. And it was a terrifically intimate experience, and yet also at the same time a very anonymous one. And it was all about bodies. Do you understand where I'm going now? It was all about the sensations of the body and being reminded that I have arms and shoulders and legs and a trunk, and that they don't work always as well as I'd like them to. And yet they're all there, and I felt every muscle, and I felt them stretched and pulled and distorted and cleaned. We forget that the body is a spiritual entity. You know, we in the West, especially we who have the Protestant disposition, tend to think that the spirit is all kind of up here in our head, kind of running the machine like behind a counter in our brain, and thinking that's where it all happens, is up here. And that's one of the reasons we like our church to be quiet and things, because we want to not think about our bodies, we want to think about the spirit. And I'm here to tell you that the spirit lives in the body, that they are not separate, they're connected. They can't be otherwise. And this is something children know. They learn not by sitting there listening to a teacher telling them how to do things, they learn by doing things with their bodies. We learn how to take turns by standing at the bottom of the slide waiting for our turn to go up and slide down. If someone teacher said, well, the only way to do this fair is to take turns, you'd never figure that out. Kids don't know the abstraction of taking turns. They have to do it to get it. Likewise, when two children are quarreling over the same piece of cake, every parent knows that you say, Sam will cut and Jane will pick. And suddenly their tummies are giving them very good ethical instructions. You see what I mean? We learn with our bodies, and our bodies are spiritually significant. Other cultures know this. If you've ever been to yoga, you know that it's not about the thinking, it's about the bending. It's also about the breathing. And for those of us who have attended an occasional synagogue service knows that the prayers are said, but they're also danced. That if you were to be in an Orthodox synagogue or even at a Chavas Israel, when you reach those phrases, Oseh Shalom Bimromav, you would say, Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu Va'al Kol Yisrael, and you bow to the left and to the right and to the center. It's part of the prayer itself. And of course, even Christians, we uptight, corseted folk, even those that say we're not Christians, but we really are culturally. Every now and then we take communion, and suddenly we're eating and drinking, which is a bodily function that is symbolically fraught. I bathed a baby in water. Why couldn't I just say, let's dedicate this? We had to do something. We had to do something physical. We had to use our bodies to make it real. So I want to emphasize the physicality of spirituality, which is what children know. They know that what matters takes place with their bodies, not just with their brains. And we adults tend to lose that. We need to remember it. We need to remember the basic ways in which we learn, that we learn with our bodies. Erik Erikson, the great psychologist, says that the basic questions of life, whether you trust your life, whether you can master your own fate, whether you can work on your own, are learned in childhood when you learn that mother is there and will feed you, when you learn how to control your bowels, when you learn how to jump and run. That's where you learn the basic things that make you a human being. Not up here, out here. We become a person through our bodies, not despite it. We know we've become significant when we can ride without our hands on the bicycle. Hey, Mom, look at me. We want to be acknowledged for our powers of the body. We also use the body to remember. In ancient medieval times, before they had printed music, people learned the notes by spots on their hand. It was called Guido's hand. Guido of Arezzo, a town in Italy, assigned a note in plain chant to every spot on the hand, and you literally could carry your music with you and look at it like that. We in Michigan know we carry a map in our hands all the time. People say, where's Grand Rapids? I hold up my hand to say, right there. That's how I remember, and that's how they know. Eric Sloane, who cataloged the work, the lore of ancient, I shouldn't say not ancient, but New England, colonial New England, tells of how on farms out in the rural areas of Massachusetts and New Hampshire and Rhode Island, that a father, mostly a father, would take a son who was going to have to be the farmer out on what were called rogation days. Rogation days mean when you circumambulate your property and you learn the property boundaries. That's very good to know. But you know what a dad would do? He'd not only say, that's the log, he'd literally shove his son into the log, push him into the stream, bump him up against the tree, trip him over the rock. Why? Because your body will remember that much more than your brain. It wasn't to hurt the child, it was to impress physically the memory. And how many of us can look back and can know that some of our most profound memories are bodily memories? A great meal, a beautiful piece of music, an exquisite embrace, a terrible disease. The body knows. Marilyn Sewell said the body has its own way of knowing, a knowing that has little to do with logic but much to do with truth, little to do with control and much to do with acceptance, little to do with division and much to do with union. One of the things we want with our spiritual lives is to feel integrated and whole and complete. And we think that somehow our minds can do that, but we have to do it with our bodies as well. What I'm saying is to forgive me and forgive the present company. I'm adopting for us a liberal doctrine of incarnation. In the Christian scripture it says, and the Word became flesh. Well, I'm not sure about that theologically, but I know physically that unless we embody what we believe, unless we live with our bodies what we believe to be true, we are not really believing it. It becomes merely an abstraction. This week in the synagogue, the portion of the Torah being read is from the very beginning, from Bereshit, Genesis, when God forms the human being from the dust of the land. James Weldon Johnson, in his series of poems called God's Trombones, talks about God bending over the riverbank and forming the first human like a mammy would hold a baby. He uses the word mammy because he's speaking in that vernacular. Can we imagine for a moment that it's our bodies that are sacred, not just our brains? And when you think that our bodies are sacred, that they are spiritual, now I want you to look at what we do to bodies.